Um, Hello and welcome to Synthesizer event, the first one, hopefully not the last one. Thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Eric Berger. I'm born in Chicago, Illinois, and I live here in Fukuoka City. So yeah, I thought before we begin, we'll do some quick introductions. I began using synthesizers when I was maybe 19. In university, I bought this keyboard, and it started a passion for synthesizers for me. And I like to play various types of music. I also record and kind of independently produce lo-fi or synth pop and similar music to that. And yeah, I'm excited to teach a little bit and experiment together, and I'd like to learn a little bit about each of you. It seems we have some people who have a little bit of experience, or maybe some people never tried a synthesizer before. So maybe we can go around and name and experience. All right, so when you think about synthesizers, or you see oscilloscopes or diagrams of how does a synthesizer create music, it can be very confusing and exciting and scary. But hopefully today I can make it a little more clear about some of the basic concepts. So the first things we'll be discussing are voltage, frequency, and intervals. Well, yeah, it's kind of hard to explain. These are the kind of most basic building blocks of synth sounds. So the most basic kind of synth engine, I guess you would say, or the things that create the sounds in the original synthesizers were a thing called VCOs, or voltage controlled oscillator. These are what create the sounds in any analog synthesizer, but they also sometimes are what people use to describe digital synthesizer. So this is a kind of rough version of what a VCO would look like in a schematic. I come into synthesizers from a musician standpoint, so this is a little bit beyond my ability, but this is a basic building block of what's inside. So, and many people are a little confused about the difference between what is an analog synthesizer or a digital synthesizer. What is different about it? And I'll try to kind of basically explain it. Basically, an analog synthesizer will create electricity to flow through a circuit, and that is turned into sound, I think is the best way to say it. So let's get started with the waves. This is frequency we're talking about here. So there are several different types of main waves that synthesizers use. For example, a sine wave, or a sawtooth wave, triangle wave, or a square wave. And every wave that comes out of the synthesizer will have a corresponding frequency. So for example, I think, as far as I know, this is a a square wave that will be at 440 hertz, as far as I know. This one. It's either 440 or close to it. And so the movement of the wave creates the pitch, or the sound. And so, as you can see, this would be a full wave here from the start to the beginning. That's the wavelength of the wave. Let's ganbarimashou. So that's that right here. We have 440 as a square wave, or pulse wave. However, if you take a second wave and put it over with the waves more close together, that will create a higher pitch. So for example, this is roughly what a 880 hertz wave would look like. It's about half the width, and so it will be double the pitch. I think we should have this one and this one together. And this. So, for example, we have, you can hear the 440 and the 880. And again, if you want to create a still different sound, you would create a different frequency, a different hertz. Something like this. So, the way you line up the waves and how they interact with each other is a lot of how synthesizers create their sounds. So, the next thing we're going to talk about real quick is amplitude and envelopes. So, maybe many of you have seen this before. It's a very common symbol in working with synthesizers. And it has 4 parts: the attack, the decay, the sustain, and the release. Yeah. So what these different things mean, the attack is how, hang on, maybe I should go back a little bit. The envelope is taking the waves and creating a shape for them to kind of rest in, or to, it controls how the sound comes out of the synthesizer, to just show it instead of talking about it. So, for example, attack is how quickly the volume will go up for the sound. If you have very low attack, it will sound something like this, and right away the sound hits. As opposed to a slow attack or a higher attack, the volume swells up more slowly. So low attack or 0 attack, it's like this right away. And then if you can have the attack all the way up, and it's still going on. It can take a very long time. And decay, right after attack, will be when you're holding the key, how quickly that first sound will get quieter. So like a first, kind of like a pulse or a push kind of sound. So for example, if we have these all turned down, we have the attack is 0, decay, it's getting longer and longer. And you can notice even if I hold the key down, if the decay is short, it'll stop very quickly. Then we have sustain, which is how the sound will hold after the first push or the first burst of sound. So if you're holding down the key and the decay is 短くても you hear that first louder sound come up a lot quicker. And the release is just if whether or not there is a sound after you hit the key. So that's release. Shorter release. release, like that. So you can have many different envelope shapes, and they'll create different kinds of sounds. This would be attack, decay, sustain, release. Something like this would sound like 0, sustain, something like this. Maybe a little more release on there. You hear the release slowly get down from there. This one, for example, would be a quick attack, middle decay, or 0 decay, middle sustain, and a long release. Something like that. Something like that. Or for example, this is a very low, slow, long attack, very short decay, medium sustain, and no release. It's kind of that little peak sound right there. And there's quite a few more. I don't know if maybe it's not necessary to go through all of these, but typically it'll be something similar to this, or without the attack part at the beginning. There's a kind of a burst at the beginning and then slowly tapers off. So the envelope controls the volume, and now we also have the pitch or frequency from before. It would look something like this. And that same shape for that one. It's kind of what they look like. My drawings are a little sloppy, forgive me. I hope it makes it easy to understand. So, or something like this. Give me a second to get this set up. The attack, down, the decay and sustain over here, and a long release. Maybe not that long. Also, we need to change this from mono to poly here. No. Okay, poly. Yes. Okay, I'm gonna write that too. So, say we have this triangle wave here. We get something like that. It's got a long fade at the end. And then if you take a second node, it will follow the same envelope, whether or not they're together or apart. Right. So each key controls a different frequency, but the envelope covers all the keys. Even if you have, say, 3 different ones, you could have something like this. They'll all fade at the same rate. Next, and this is the last section here, we'll talk about filters and modulation a little bit. A filter, there are many different kinds of filters, but the most commonly used ones control the EQ of the signal coming out from the synth. So for example, we have this sound. This is with no filter over it, and then you do something like this, and it begins to cut the treble frequencies. It's used in DJing also a lot. But there are also other kinds, like a high pass filter over here, which here's high pass, so only getting the treble frequencies at that. You can move it tighter or looser.
like different presets that are built into it. So you can change the equalizer manually, or like presets you can use as well.
The filter will control. It basically assigns a knob to control where this slope will go. See, the benefit of it, you could just have a separate mixer with EQ knobs, but the benefit of this is while you're playing, you can set it on the go. You can have it be on board, and also it has to do with resonance, which we'll get to later on in a second.
フィルターは別の機械でもしてもいいけど、弾きながらそのカットする周波数を変えたりすることで、こんな感じで音が変わるので
Something like this seems very insignificant, but this is what resonance basically looks like on a synthesizer, where the peak is exaggerated, I guess. So whatever your filter, this is part of why a regular EQ typically doesn't have this. It will create a sort of different, oh, wrong one, sorry. This one. Different pitches and different kind of flavor to the sounds, depending on. Without any resonance, it'll sound like this. It's much more straight kind of sound. With resonance, more round kind of sound. And the resonance chip on this synthesizer is not very good. It's a little better on this one, but the type of resonance also is important for that. Lastly, modulation is a very complicated process that is part of how a frequency modulation synthesizer works, but I'll talk about the basic level of it for now, and then we'll get started trying these out. So the simplest way to talk about it, I believe, is on this keyboard here. Back to that 440 sound. Without any modulation or filter, it will sound like this. And adding on a filter, can calm it down a little bit. And then adding modulation will make it sound like this. Kind of a waving sort of sound. It's very important for making natural sounding synthesizers sounds. Or very crazy ones like this. Yeah, dubstep has a lot of fun with that type of stuff. But basically what's happening here is you have the general wave, which normally would go at an even pace, is changing pitch, so the wave peaks and valleys are getting pushed together or stretched apart. And it's, they're getting really stretched apart or really compressed if you have the depth of the modulation higher. And what that's called in a lot of other, for guitarists, I also play guitar, and a lot of times you'll have a vibrato or a vibe pedal that will do a similar kind of thing, where in music I think it's just generally called vibrato, when the pitch is being changed. It'll sound something like this. Without, just like that. And with changing the depth will make it more difference, and changing the rate will be how quickly those differences happen. Vibrato is a kind of modulation. However, you can also modulate just about anything. This wave would represent the modulation wave on top of the regular wave, which creates the purple in the back. However, you can modulate cutoff like this instead of pitch. Cutoff would be the same thing as the low pass filter is affecting here. So for example, there, instead of changing the frequency, instead of changing the pitch, it's changing the amount of treble coming through the mix from the synthesizer. You'll notice this is something I didn't plan to talk about today, but when you have these filters going, if you turn them up high enough, you start to get harmonic frequencies, other kinds of sounds coming through as well. So here we have the, but you also have kind of sound coming through also. Also some low bass. Anyway. Yeah. Things like that. There are many different ways you can use modulation and filters and different kinds of waves interacting with each other. But this is basically the beginning of that. I hope it's helpful for maybe you're thinking of creating something and give you an idea or help you to fly off with your ideas and your dreams. So thank you very much. Yeah, that's about it. Any questions right away from the talk? Otherwise, we'll get started with this.
Maybe after everyone's questions, but if you'd be able to give us like a mini demonstration, like 2 minutes, just play for you.
Oh, we'll play something.
Like a jam or something.
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to. Any other questions? Yeah, 日本語でも英語でも大丈夫です。
波形みたいなのっていうのは、なんかこう頭の中にあった方が作りやすいから今説明された。Is it easier to make the sounds if you imagine the wave shapes you're making?
I think, sometimes is the best answer I can give. Sometimes I just want to play and feel something, and I know what the different functions will do, so I can just say, oh, I think it's this one or this one. But to understand when someone talks about modulation or wave tabling or all those other things, if you know what it is, I think it can help you to have a deeper control over what you create. Yeah. Anybody else?
モジュラーシンセの鍵盤なんですか?
Is this a keyboard on the little tiny synthesizer?
These, yes, it is.
演出するときそこを押しながら演奏する。
Well, 結構難しいんだからあんまりなんか直接使えないと思うんですけど、ミディでつながったら音が結構いいところはなんかテスティングしながら、これがいいかなとか。
音を作ってこれを使ってシーケンサーで
パフォーマンスで結構やらない。
演奏できない。
できるけど、なんか sequencing とか just checking the sound is it's useful.
外部でシーケンサーっていうのがあってカウントするんだと思うけど、それ右に差し込んで再生をしたら自動的になるんですね。カウントするんで。You guys use sequencer, right?
Sorry?
Sequencer?
Oh, well, yeah. For these ones, if you want just the sound, for example, if I didn't bring a MIDI cable, but if you take MIDI here to here, and you want to use something like this, for example. But you want to be able to play it with actual keys, then you can just have this by itself. Or you can set up the notes and play the sequence like that. And MIDI to different drum machines, synthesizers. They're very useful, but they're very hard to play if you want to perform. Half of it. Yeah. Anybody else? Any other questions? I'm happy to take as much time as we need for this.
How much do these cost if you're just getting like a second-hand one?
That's a good question. Actually, even though 多分見えないと思うけど、これは一番高かった。これ新しく買ってくれて、その時になんか4万円。それでもそんなに高くない申請でもこれとかは1万2万ぐらいして、これは実は5とか7万するけど、ブックオフ博多で7000しました。
だいぶ使い込んでる感じがあるけど、最近買ったんですか？
いや、最近。
だいぶ使い込んでる感じが。
This is from 1978. So long before I was born. It's my senpai. Yes, it's very. なんかあんまり音が変えられないけど、そのままの音結構いいと思います。なんか。It's a terrifying issue. So I can barely explain it myself. I won't get into it, but it's very analog, vintage sound. It's I like it. It's very heavy. Yeah. That's it for the questions for now. I guess I could play something real quick. Could I use that your drum machine?
OK。
If it's okay.
みんな座って。じゃあちょっと演奏して、で演奏してから体験しましょう。これ借りてもらって。はい。人の曲を吹ければ。